English pronunciation is stupid.
Thanks, Frank.
Stupid.
Hi everyone, welcome back to English with Max. Yes, as I'm sure you know, English spelling and pronunciation can be rather frustrating because we often don't pronounce things exactly as they are spelt. In fact, there are many letters that we don't pronounce at all. I talked about that in my video on silent letters. And there are some letters or syllables that we sometimes pronounce, but that we don't usually pronounce. If you're confused, don't worry because it will become clear very soon. This will help your listening skills and it will also help you to sound more natural when you speak English. We're going to look at what are called missing or disappearing syllables. Some people also call them dropped syllables. For example, let's look at this very common word. Non-native English speakers tend to pronounce this several. Several. With 3 syllables. That's not incorrect. You can say it that way, but most of the time native speakers say several. Several. With 2 syllables. There are quite a few common words in which we usually drop a syllable. Most of the time it's a schwa sound. All of these words have 3 or more syllables in the long version. We especially do this if we're speaking quickly or in a relaxed way. And this is not something that's specific to American English or British English or Australian English. Basically, all native speakers do this. We're not going to cover every single word where this happens, but we'll look at some very common ones that you should definitely be aware of. Most of these have the same pronunciation in British and American English, but if they're different, I will point that out. Before we start, I'd just like to remind you that I also send out a free advanced English email lesson every 2 weeks for people who really want to improve their vocabulary. If you would like to sign up for that, you'll find the link in the description. Okay, let's start. This word can be pronounced average. Average. But most of the time, we actually say average. 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 So although it's not wrong to say average, usually we don't pronounce the second syllable, and we say average. This word can be pronounced beverage. Beverage. But usually we say beverage. Beverage. I'm sure you know this word. This technically can be pronounced camera. Camera. But I've hardly ever heard a native speaker say camera. We basically always say camera. Camera. This one can be pronounced Catholic. Catholic. But we usually say Catholic. Catholic. This one can technically be pronounced chocolate. Chocolate. But again, I've hardly ever heard a native speaker say that. We basically always say chocolate. Chocolate. That's the British pronunciation. In American English, the first O is pronounced a little differently. It's chocolate. Chocolate. British English, chocolate. Chocolate. American English, chocolate. Chocolate. The next one can be pronounced conference. Conference. But usually we say conference. Conference. Again, the O is a little different in American English. In American English, this is conference. Conference. British English, conference. Conference. American English, conference. Conference. This word can be pronounced desperate. Desperate. But most of the time we say desperate. Desperate. This word can be pronounced difference. Difference. But usually we say difference. Difference. And a similar thing happens with the adjective. You can say different. Different. But usually we say different. Different. What do you think about this word? Yes, you can say family. Family. And in fact, lots of native speakers do say it that way. But we also often say family. Family. This word can be pronounced general. General. But usually we say general. General. And something similar happens with the adverb. You can say generally. Generally. But we usually say generally. Generally. The next one is history. History. Lots of native speakers do say it like that, but I'd say it's more common to say it with 2 syllables. History. History. You might have noticed that in that second version, I actually pronounced the T like a ch. That's because if we drop the schwa, we have a t followed by a r. If that happens in English, we often pronounce it tr. Tr. History. History. This one can be pronounced interest. Interest. But that sounds a bit strange. Normally we say interest. Interest. Again, we have a t followed by a r, so it becomes tr. Interest. You don't have to do that. You can say interest, but most people say interest. This word can be pronounced interesting. Interesting. But usually we say interesting. Interesting. Next we have miserable. Miserable. You can say it that way, but we usually say miserable. Miserable. This one can be pronounced nationally. Nationally. But it's more common to say nationally. Nationally. Here we have the adjective separate. Separate. It's normally pronounced separate. Separate. I'm saying that it's the adjective because the verb is pronounced separate. Separate. And finally, one that causes a lot of frustration for English learners. This can technically be pronounced vegetable. Vegetable. But honestly, I don't think I've ever heard a native speaker say that. I highly recommend that you just say vegetable. Vegetable. Now, you might be thinking, but how do we know if we can drop a syllable? Are there rules? The answer is kind of. I wouldn't say that there are rules, but there are some guidelines that might help. For example, this often happens to a syllable if the next sound is a r, like in average. There's a schwa followed by a r. As I said, you can say average or average. This is also the case with different. Remember, different or different. But there are exceptions. For example, with the word calorie. There's a schwa followed by a r. If someone's speaking really fast, they might drop the schwa and say calorie, but native speakers almost always pronounce it here. So we say calorie. Calorie. It's also quite common if a schwa is followed by a l sound, like in family. Remember, you can say family or family. But again, there are exceptions. For example, in this word, we pronounce all the syllables. It's vocally. Vocally. So I think it's best just to learn the pronunciations of words individually. This can be a little difficult to figure out if you're not able to ask an English teacher or a native speaker, because even dictionaries don't always contain the same information. But I'm going to show you a couple of websites which can help. Okay, the first website I'm going to show you is actually a dictionary. This isn't the main dictionary that I use online, but it's probably the best when it comes to disappearing syllables, at least among the dictionaries that I know. So for example, if we type in average, it shows you that you can pronounce it average or average. And if we type in family, for example, it shows you that you can say it family or family. Now, one of the best websites for hearing how native speakers usually pronounce things is this one here. It's called Youglish, and it goes through YouTube videos to allow you to hear how people say certain words or phrases. You can type the word in here. So we'll type in average. And then if you click UK, you'll be able to hear people with British accents saying average.
And on average, that point is about $85,000
than the average Chinese. Today, it's...
The average car costs...
on average 200 penal.
You can also make it go a little bit slower if you want.
Need to be illustrated.
is older than the average startup.
Okay, now if you, for example, type in family, and then click US, you'll hear people with American accents saying family.
Younger men today expect to be able to balance work and family. They want.
So it turns out that the average single-family household in the U.S.
Okay, I think you get the idea. In any case, this is great for pronunciation. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, and remember to hit that big red subscribe button if you don't want to miss any new videos. See you next time. Okay, let's start. For example, if someone's speaking really fast, there are an...
Stupid.
Oh. Nice. Is that going to stop? R. Like